Moscow, early September 1937. Stalin's paranoia, building since the turbulent events of the early 1930s, explodes into global events as Soviet troops mass east of Poland. In early 1934, relations between Hitler's Third Reich and Stalin's Soviet Union had begun to cool dramatically. By early 1936, Stalin is convinced that Hitler intends to invade Poland and decides to plot a preemptive invasion of his own. By the late summer of 1937, Europe is on the brink of general war, though few at the time, outside the corridors of the Kremlin, were aware of the coming calamity. Europe before the storm, September 1st, 1937. Though not yet formally aligned, Hitler and Mussolini operate in close partnership. In the Soviet Union, Stalin has set aside his internal security concerns, reducing the scale of the ongoing Red Army officer corps purge and rapidly expanding the Red Army with an additional 50 divisions since early 1936. September 11th, 1937. In the pre-dawn hours along the Soviet-Polish frontier, dozens of Red Army divisions are on the move. Just west of Minsk, Soviet tank columns stream along a recently paved road, heading westward towards the Polish border. As the first distant rolling thunder marks the initial artillery barrages, low-flying ground attack aircraft fly overhead in a steady torrent. Further east lines of trucks stretch out over the horizon, each truck carrying over a dozen nervous young Russian conscripts, clutching their rifles, smoking, and praying to the god the commissars insist does not exist. The Red Army is on the move, and the world will soon be rocked to its very core. The Soviet invasion of Poland has begun. The German Reich, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom and the US all condemn the invasion, while Radio Moscow hails the liberation of the Polish people from the fascist, reactionary Warsaw clique.
As of 1937, the Soviet T-26 light tank, an adaptation of the British Vickers 6-ton, was a significant force in armored warfare, with over 11,000 units produced. This 9.6-ton tank, equipped with a 45mm tank gun and a 7.62mm machine gun, was powered by a 90-horsepower engine, achieving speeds up to 31.1 kilometers per hour and a maximum road range of 240 kilometers. It featured a robust quarter-elliptic leaf spring suspension and a 5-gear transmission. The T-26 was known for its armor, effective against the small arms and light artillery of its time, marking a notable advancement in the Soviet Union's military engineering and tank design capabilities in the 1930s.
September 21st, 1937. Despite significant supply and maintenance problems within the Red Army, Soviet armored spearheads advanced some 100 kilometers in 2 weeks following their deep penetration offensive doctrine. Polish resistance is fierce but ill-coordinated and overly brave at times, as their troops often refuse to withdraw, preferring instead to stand to the last man, defending their homeland. Polish counter-thrusts, often led by mounted dragoons and charging cavalry, are fierce but ill-equipped to handle the masses of Soviet armor. By the end of the second week of the invasion, Polish forces are collapsing on a 200-kilometer front, and Soviet generals are preparing to begin the encirclement of Warsaw. Even as the Red Army sweeps across eastern Poland, the Red Air Force visits destruction from the air upon Warsaw and other Polish cities. Everywhere, Polish defenders are buckling, yet their will to resist remains firm. September 26th, 1937. 3 Polish Army Corps are beginning to regroup in central Poland, but Soviet forces continue to advance on broad fronts. Leading Red Army elements are within 35 kilometers of Warsaw. In Berlin, Hitler makes the fateful decision to begin openly arming Poland. In a radio address broadcast across Germany and Europe, the Reich Führer proclaims the urgent need to defend Europe against the Bolshevist menace. In the coming weeks, Germany begins funneling in tanks, artillery, and aircraft to aid the Poles, while German volunteers begin appearing on Polish battlefields. October 12, 1937. Despite strengthening Polish resistance, Soviet armored spearheads have joined up west of Warsaw, putting the Polish capital under siege. Soviet forces are hammering the city with intense artillery fire and air bombardment. The Polish army, now increasingly bolstered with German equipment and volunteer forces, continues to fight fiercely despite the isolation of Warsaw. In the north, Soviet forces reached the border with East Prussia in early October and have now swept southward in a vast envelopment maneuver to surround an entire Polish army corps. Some Polish units flee into Germany and East Prussia, where the German army now masses to deter any further Soviet aggression. In the south, Polish forces have stabilized the front east of Lublin and are now preparing for an effort to relieve the besieged capital city of Warsaw. October 23, 1937. Combined Polish and German volunteer forces have launched a sharp armored counteroffensive, making contact with the beleaguered Warsaw garrison 15 kilometers southwest of the capital city. The Warsaw pocket has been relieved. In Warsaw and other cities across unoccupied Poland, there is celebration, muted by the knowledge that the overall situation remains dire for Poland. The following evening, the Soviet Red Air Force visits Warsaw, Lublin, Lodz, and Poznan, with hundreds of medium and heavy bombers conducting the largest bombing raids of the war to date.
This is the BBC from London. The time is 11 p.m. Here is the news on the evening of October 24, 1937.
Soviet bombers have again droned over Warsaw and most of the major unoccupied cities of western and southern Poland, delivering many tons of high explosives. We have no reports yet of the casualties, but we can only assume they are heavy. This, then, is the petty revenge of the tyrant in Moscow for the Polish lifting of the siege of their capital.
November 3, 1937. The Soviet Union unleashes a fresh new offensive along the southern Polish front. Polish defenses, which had been stripped to bolster the Warsaw counter-offensive, melt away in the face of 600,000 fresh Soviet troops and some 2,000 tanks. In the north, Soviet forces renew their offensive as well, wheeling further south and west in an effort to pinch off Warsaw once again while isolating Polish forces in the Danzig corridor. Polish resistance is beginning to buckle but remains fanatical. November 12, 1937. Warsaw is once again surrounded by a Soviet ring of steel. For the second time in the past month, Warsaw is a city under siege. In the south, the Polish army has been bottled up into several large pockets. Poland stands on the brink of collapse. November 20th, 1937. The last of the southern Polish pockets have been reduced. Nearly 800,000 Polish soldiers surrender. Warsaw continues to resist, but is being mauled by around-the-clock, relentless shelling. A joint operation of the British Secret Intelligence Service and German Abwehr manages to evacuate top Polish officials aboard several light aircraft. A Polish government in exile will be established in Berlin within days. November 27, 1937. After a renewed 2-week siege and heavy fighting, the Warsaw garrison surrenders after running out of ammunition and food. remaining Polish military formations across western Poland agree to an unconditional surrender by the end of the day. Over 4 million Polish refugees will manage to flee into East Prussia, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania before the Soviets gain effective control of the Polish borders. Before the end of the week, unconfirmed reports of Soviet atrocities begin to filter out of occupied Poland. December 2nd, 1937. The Soviets have installed a puppet communist regime in Poland and, on Stalin's orders, now initiate a ruthless purge of Poland's elite. 400,000 Soviet soldiers and secret police are to remain in Poland to ensure civil order and guard against Western capitalist interventions. The 3-month Polish War has provided the great powers with a lot of useful data from the field. Both Germany and the Soviet Union moved to accelerate the pace of development into their respective next generation of tanks. Germany, already fielding the Panzer II, is close to construction of the Mk3 model. Further off, still in the design phase, is the Mk4 model. The Soviets, meanwhile, focus on readying their advanced T-34 design. January 3rd, 1938. Fear has spread across Central Europe following the Soviet defeat and occupation of Poland, giving Hitler the leverage he needs to force a mutual defense pact with Czechoslovakia. The German-speaking Sudetenland is annexed to the German Reich as part of the new treaty. The agreement is hailed by many in Britain and France as the Great Wall against the Marxist threat. Others are more wary of Hitler's true intentions.